Correctly with the correct amount.
We're about to listen to One Day in the Lab, a play for radio written by Felix Carlyle.
Hello, listeners. To appreciate what you are about to hear, you must put yourself into a state of suspended disbelief. I want you to close your eyes and imagine yourself sitting somewhere in the front rows of a domed sports arena. All around, the seating area is in complete darkness, but hovering high in the center of this space is a large, illuminated sphere surrounded by several much smaller spheres of varying sizes, all of which you instantly recognize as our solar system. The Sun is about 10 meters in diameter, and the Earth the size of a tennis ball. On the floor below all this is an elaborate piece of equipment, a computer controlling floating X-ray cameras that can be moved around to view the different planets from close up. The rest of the volume is taken up with other solar systems in what we can perceive to be our Milky Way galaxy. Okay, listeners, have you got the picture? Good. Now, off to the side of the computer equipment is what looks to you like television monitors, display screens, 24 of them altogether, mounted in 4 banks. Amongst all this is a group of luminous objects, each slightly different in size and color. They are, in fact, what you, the outside viewer, call aliens. They have no distinct body or limbs, but they move and seem to interact in the same manner as living creatures. Now get ready for this. The aliens, the machines, the whole arena are part of another world, one so vast that it can reduce planet Earth to the size of a tennis ball, and its millions of years of existence to a few months of their time. As your eyes adjust to the light conditions, one of the creatures reshapes itself and manipulates controls on some of the equipment, then turns and prepares to address the others. You will know him as Dr. Albert Foster, director of the experimental laboratory complex in which they are standing, along with his 2 invited visitors, Charles, design supervisor at the Institute, a separate organization that carries on complementary work to that shown here, and Willem, an associate who understands administrative efficiency more than technical matters.
There, how's that? I'm attempting to... How's that any better now? Good, we made it. I'm attempting to get our communication systems in line with the language of this experiment. They actually have many variations of language and dialect, but this is the principal one. I think it'll be more interesting for all of us and put you in the frame of mind for understanding the work that's being done here. Most importantly, we may be able to isolate some of the featured individual beings and be able to actually listen to them directly without the need for any further translations. Although those can be easily arranged telepathically.
Excellent. So what have we got here, Albert? Oh, that's interesting. Where did this Albert come from?
It's apparently part of the translation arrangement that our technicians set up. I've been assigned Albert, you are Willem, and we've got Charles here from the Institute. I don't know what the words mean, but they are obviously names or ways of designating individuals.
All right, Albert. I do like that. I've only briefly read the progress report. It's fascinating, but frankly, most of the description goes beyond me. So for my benefit at least, can you just provide the non-technical summary?
Fine. Charles has access to all the parameters anyway. Look, thank you both for coming. Ask any type of question without fear or favour. I insist that your assessments remain absolutely objective. But our mission here was to develop one small world that could produce and nurture life. Life that over a period would evolve from the simple to the complex. We were free to choose any technique and have conducted many experiments that are quite different from one another. In other setups, we produced what were theoretically superior worlds, but none was as robust or developed the biological diversity as this Gaia that we're about to demonstrate to you.
We too have concluded that the creation of planets provides the best experimental platform. But what makeup? What size? Materials? Atmosphere? Your use of that giant sun seems a major design breakthrough.
It's a big layout, Albert.
So many planets. And what about all these millions of stars?
Yes, those stars. They're part of an earlier setup where we created an enormous cosmic explosion that hurled different combinations of matter in all directions. The idea was that at least one high-quality, life-supporting planet or star would emerge out of so many millions.
So was this an attempt to shortcut the use of statistical randomness rather than hard science?
Absolutely. We were under pressure to produce results, Willem, and our Big Bang theory held strong probabilities. It was worth a try. Its failure, however, was a strong message that to support the growth and development of life forms requires an intelligent designer. This accidental universe has actually provided us with useful information, but I know, we probably should have removed it all by now.
That sun is massive, Albert. Which of those planets is the one codenamed Earth?
Earth is the third from the Sun. Apart from the composition of materials, life on the planet depends on getting just the right combinations of light and warmth from that Sun. This is affected by distance as well as the size and rate of rotation of the object. We tinkered with all those factors and have constructed perhaps 10 or 11 planets to get this small one. Unlike the others, it makes extensive use of hydrogen and oxygen. H2O covers 70% of the surface.
So those other spheres then, they are experiments that failed?
I'm afraid so, Willem. Most are still there spinning around the Sun. By keeping these other planets, though, in their original positions for reference, we ended up with this little solar system you see before you.
Does that mean its creation was incidental? It serves no purpose?
You could say that. The individual planets are not related.
And Earth's tiny satellite?
Its gravity acts to stabilise the Earth's rotation to prevent wobble. That moon was also a crude attempt to provide some reflective light to Earth's dark side as it spins. I say crude because its position isn't synchronised with that of the Sun's. Its cycles are different every day. But making the necessary adjustments just didn't seem a priority. Despite all that, the physical system has been working very effectively and has produced a greater number and variety of species than we ever expected. Now, however, we are bedevilled by the activities of its major one.
And you've chosen to use this time concept with a single direction.
Of course, we don't always feel comfortable working in such a restricted dimension, but it's the only logical way to work with simple evolution. Surely, Charles, your group are doing much the same.
Dr. Foster, you must be aware that there may be no further allocation for this type of program.
It's been made very clear that this will be the final in the series, and that's why we're anxious to see that it be allowed to reach its own ultimate end, for which there are several possibilities. Now, if you'd like to move over here, where we've got all the apparatus, I can ask our operator to concentrate the anthroscan on Earth, and we'll have a closer look. Good. Now, allow me to introduce you to our senior design coordinator, Gary Lionheart. There we are. The equipment takes a few seconds to work out the translation from our communication pattern and select from its million-plus Earthwords dictionary. So it's Gary Lionheart. I'm sure you know him by reputation. Oh, and that is Hans back there at the controls. Gary's team has been responsible for the creation of most of what you see before you and all of the programming. A description of the software used is in the report which you have.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. I'm particularly excited with what is, in our opinion, by far the most important creation experiment of its genre. Charles, whatever success we can demonstrate now is built upon the same basic methodology used in your Section J at the Institute. The fission formula was modified using JVSL J88797. Sorry, but that doesn't translate.
Excuse me for interrupting, Gary. Albert, it is not an objective of this session, nor do we have enough time to go through fission formulas in any detail. With respect, this session is an observation exercise, so that I can report as to whether the funding provided is being well spent, and so that Charles can see for himself whether this project is worth saving.
Quite so. Gary, please concentrate on providing our colleagues here with information on the actual results, the what, not the how, in terms of the creation and fairly rapid evolution of life forms on Earth.
Yes, of course. Previous work that we and others have done has been plagued by an inability to create systems that lasted very long, with the result that the life forms weren't granted enough time to fully evolve. This use of a small planet, although quite unstable internally and with an atmosphere often hostile to its inhabitants, has so far been an excellent medium to explore the concept of progressive development.
But I gather from the report you think that its dominant inhabitants may well self-destruct very soon. Can't you change things to prevent that?
Well, yes and no. Look, we can go back and alter events and then restart so that we can affect the past, but we can't control their future.
And so it should be. But Gary, please, as we get into it, those types of questions will all be answered.
Yes, sir. Willem, I doubt that you've seen an anthroscan in operation before. Right. Well, our machine is able to be moved around at will. For this experiment, we use it to monitor the activities of the Sun and 2 or 3 of the other planets at any one time. We can vary the total power according to the different lenses, and lately we've been concentrating about 80% directly at Earth. The other 3 positions, well, actually only 2 at the moment, one's on the Sun, and the other monitoring the space probe Cassini that the Earthlings have sent out to the planet they call Saturn. It's their first venture into deep space and a major step for them. Now, what I've been asked to do today is to use the anthroscan recordings to show compressed highlights of the entire development period on Earth, stopping or slowing to remark upon points which should be of particular interest. I will then turn you over to Dr. Foster, who will explain the results where we made important interventions as the planet's life forms evolved. Hans, please begin at the first patch as we discussed. Our team have recorded the entire... There, on the top row of screens. That's good, Hans. Now, as I was saying, our team has recorded the entire period from the first fission explosions in our vacuum to the activities that you see on the screens in front of you. Using Earth time, this 4th setup began almost 6 months ago. Now, on the time scale of its occupants, that represents almost 4 million years. So obviously, if we were to show you the events occurring there at the pace that they are experiencing, we would have to slow the process by a factor of about 1.2 billion, which is being completed right now.
Pardon me, Dr. Foster.
Your request for communication with President Ryan has come through and is available to you now.
Oh, fine, thank you. I trust that you arranged for me to understand the President without changing communication mode.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This communication system produces a strange lag.
If you'll all please excuse me a moment, I need to speak to President Ryan. Gary, you and Hans carry on. Hello, sir. Oh, sorry. Hello, this is Albert Foster. Do we have an answer?
Albert, the committee has read the report closely, and clearly the ability of your creatures to construct has grown enormously, yet their ability to be constructive has foundered. Their very existence borders on chaos.
Perhaps, but they are making enormous advances. I've brought in Charles from the Institute to give you an outside assessment. He and Willem are here right now. We've only just started our demonstration.
We think we've learnt enough already. There is no final decision yet, but we will probably call for immediate curtailment. You'll do better next time.
Sir, you know that what we've accomplished here is significant and will be difficult to duplicate. It's a genuine history lesson, but only if we're allowed to see it through to its natural end. And what's this about next time?
Albert, enough! Complete your sessions there with Willem and Charles. I will attend there shortly.
Dr. Foster. Hans has just demonstrated to Charles some of the features of our anthroscan. Apparently it's almost twice as powerful as the ones at the Institute.
But theirs aren't under threat. Please carry on.
As I was explaining, life on our little planet began with single cells and has gone through a natural evolutionary process of some 4,000 million years of Earth time, all with the Anthroscan programmed at a modest rate. About 85 billion of these Homo sapiens that Dr. Foster created have each existed for only a moment, but in that moment reproduced themselves beyond replacement level, so that there are many more in existence now than ever before at one time. In only the last 5,000 years, that species has multiplied totally out of proportion to all others and created a serious imbalance that threatens their very survival. And what's even more remarkable, Charles, every one of them is distinctively different.
A species where every example is different and with no design constraints mates at will. Surely a recipe for disaster.
Earth's atmosphere and internal grumblings seem relatively stable compared to similar environments that we've created. However, the situation appears to be constantly volatile. Earthquakes, hurricanes, droughts, floods, all causing considerable disturbances.
And those inhabitants who can fly to their moon are unable to effectively influence these extremes? Have they tried?
No. Instead, they expend their efforts on weapons and wars and accept climate is inevitable. And then they blame us. In recent times, their own actions have altered the biosphere profoundly, even though here they did have options. As a result, our Anthroscan program is considerably out of calibration.
I think it's this linear time concept that confounds most of our technical people. Lifespans, aging, evolution, all these are novel to us.
Please refer to screens 14 and 16, sir.
Yes, Hans, we can see them. And now what you see is our energy level graph. Using their chronology, these screens pass through the planet's recent history.
Thank you, Hans. Now please, just back it up there to that last major blip.
Note the variances in strength levels, the size of the bars. Those represent specific things such as wars or climatic upheavals, events that have had significance in Earth's or its principal species development. The changes in colour intensity, on the other hand, indicate the presence of an individual human whose life influenced or altered events or ways of thinking, or both.
There, that's it. Thanks. Whoa, stop there now. Now transfer that over to screens 1 to 8, and we'll try to pick out what's going on there. Slow it down to run at about 10 years per hour.
That's interesting. As you can see, both graphs are changing simultaneously. Apparently, the event affecting the strength deviation here is what's called the American Civil War, and the individual causing the colour change is one Abraham Lincoln.
It's important to recognise that whenever we go back in their time and slow down to a speed like this, the Anthroscan is not simply playing back a recording of historical events. The events are being repeated.
What? Exactly as they happened before?
Well, yeah, except when we do this, it's usually in order to intervene and cause changes. Then that rewrites the future, a little or a lot depending on just what we do.
Sorry, Gary, I know that this is your time, but I just want to let Willem and Charles know how important it is that they are able to see this now, because the pace of events of this experiment has accelerated enormously. More than once, we have watched events run and, having seen the results, decided to go back and change an event or introduce new ideas or power to an individual, and then let things start again. It's sometimes ineffective, sometimes clumsy, but we have made some breakthroughs that the team considers very exciting.
I understand, and this is to both of you, nowhere in the report can I see a proper comparison of the differences between letting Earth run its course on its own versus this back up and start again idea that you describe. To have observed their natural outcome and decided you want to alter, even reverse events by pulling things back, well, it seems to me a distorted experiment.
Good point, Willem. In the end, you may be unable to distinguish between the developments of this unique world created by its own life forms and those created by Dr. Foster's team in the lab here.
I think that Dr. Foster anticipated and answered that criticism quite effectively in the introduction to the report. He admits that we've been fiddling, but makes the point that this is new territory. There aren't any rules precedent when one species distorts the balance of things. Besides, exploring different possibilities is inherent to our mission.
Well, I can appreciate your dilemma, but I'm afraid that some of your colleagues have accused Dr. Foster of grandstanding by permitting all this manipulation.
Willem, the fact is, we probably won't have this opportunity again. When, on this fourth and last setup, we got these amazing results, I chose to get hands-on and take risks rather than simply let the procedures run their natural course with my team as passive observers. But please, let's continue with the demonstration. Gary, I suggest that we advance to more recent events and show our guests what's happening today. I will address the things that Willem is concerned about as we go.
Hans, please accelerate us progressively from this Civil War point to what's happening right now.
Ah, yes, I can see the problem looming already. They've developed the potential to wage war against each other with massive firepower.
You're correct, Charles, but we aren't there yet, to the edge. And the weapons that you see, tanks and small aircraft, as advanced as they are lightweights compared to what we'll pass through in a moment. There, see? Hold it, Hans. Leave it there. Back. Okay? Yeah. Now, you can see that both the energy level graphs are in a very excited state. The giant spike in the colour graph is recording their first atomic bomb explosion.
If it's all right, Gary, I'll jump in here. Access to this primitive form of nuclear fission is one of the worst perversions of man's skills and increasing knowledge. Here is a case where we could have gone back and altered events to some extent, but didn't, because I'm convinced that another group or individual would have found their way there eventually.
I can see the concern. If these weapons of mass destruction are extensively deployed, they might obliterate all life, and in the process take your experiment back to that post-dinosaur age.
Exactly. Mutually assured destruction. Their only hope for deterrence. The realization that there are no winners in an atomic war.
And apparently this MAD mad idea worked?
Well, yes and no, but we'll get to that shortly. Meanwhile, let's have Hans bring us up slowly to the present so you can observe the different things that have happened since then.
I must say that it is quite difficult for me to try to make sense out of all these things. They're happening together, and we don't know how they came to be here in the first place.
You're quite right, forgive me. We really need twice the amount of time. Let me give you some more background while we observe these more recent times of rapid change. Firstly, we can't read a future that hasn't happened. Have a look when we reach their present position. You'll see that the Anthroscan's energy screens are dead flat. The machine can't assess the significance of individuals or events until after their effects have been felt.
Excuse me, Gary, a quick question. Does the computer change the energy levels retrospectively over time?
Yeah, certainly. The ongoing impact of an event or an individual alters significantly over time. Some have increased in importance, yet many have virtually disappeared.
Now, secondly, we have been observing this planet's activities in considerable detail, and we can see where it's heading. That the dominant species has multiplied so rapidly that it's almost unknowingly devoured all the space and natural beauty that we vested in an already wonderful organism at the time of Adam and Eve, and then again after Noah. Besides the gobbling up of Gaia's resources, the threat of fission misused remains tantalizingly real. This could wipe out thousands of years of development and perhaps all of Noah's descendants. Thirdly, despite all this, what we have seen is a concerted and genuine fight back against ecological destruction and against the wholesale use of nuclear weapons. There may still be hope. And fourthly, Even if these Earthlings manage to forestall Armageddon and these potential ecological calamities, then they are still faced with the dilemma of overpopulation. We envisage a frantic race to get out onto space stations and the surrounding planets, even though these planets are inferior for their needs. We could make a couple of these more hospitable to them now that we have the correct recipe, but the expansion of this kind is contrary to our objectives. For now, we must just watch the results over these next few hundred Earth-time years.
So that means you now intend to leave planet Earth on its own?
Yes, a situation I gather you would have preferred anyway, Willem. I concede that our major interferences may not have had the effect we might have preferred or expected, but we consider that just part of the scientific process. We learn from each experience.
Dr. Foster, I think that all of us seek balance in our work and usually expect some failure as a prelude towards success. I am personally very impressed with what I see, and I must say, maintaining control here must be an interesting challenge. It sounds like fun? Sorry, a bit of trouble with that word.
Gary, please tell our colleagues about the different programs that we use to assist in the development of the intelligent life forms.
Certainly, Dr. Foster. Charles, from what we know about your work at the Institute, you have, like us, been working to create environments in a world where life forms spontaneously and evolves, gathering intelligence on the way. With this one, we finally got decent results. Planet Earth began to generate the most rudimentary life forms itself. The evolutionary process flourished and got to the point where some animals with very small intelligence quotients had developed to an enormous size. Then suddenly we watched these Jurassic creatures inexplicably die off. Only after considerable investigation were we able to conclude that the climate had become too hot due to Earth's rotation speed and its distance from the Sun.
Charles, the report has the technical notes to both of these necessary adjustments.
We now had a benchmark from which to move forward, so we kept the primeval soup and its lower life development, but we skipped the dinosaur stage and decided to build animals in the lab in an advanced state.
Call it reverse engineering.
One of our senior technicians, David Holtenberg, had his team develop certain sea animals to become the carriers of major intelligence. His theory was that the oceans have considerably more usable volume, tidal highways, and is less subject to the elements that wiped out the dinosaurs. A sort of incubator that they could migrate from when ready. David made remarkable progress, and his whales and porpoises combined powerful agility with a sensitivity and high intelligence, including complex language.
What happened to them?
Well, something quite extraordinary. In a world they considered complete, the dolphins resisted our attempts to have them evolve further and leave their peaceful oceans to live on land with all its uncertainties.
Do they still exist?
Oh, yes.
Perhaps as a powerful symbol of our folly. But let's go back. The other team devoted their entire efforts to land animal evolution, and although their primates were well adapted to their environment with brains well past those of the dinosaurs, no chimpanzee was as clever as any dolphin and couldn't create fire or tools or apply deductive reasoning. To get to that next level required our director's personal involvement. Because of this, I'd prefer that Dr. Foster describe the events.
As you wish, Gary. The team developed a specification using the success of the land team's apes and Homo erectus as a base. A bipedal mammal with hands and articulated thumbs, upright posture, etc., but with a much larger brain, a brain embedded with a complex system of oral communication. With language could come culture. This was what distinguished them from the primates, or the dolphins for that matter. After considerable experimentation, we thought we had the near-perfect dual-gender pair of Homo sapiens, Adam and Eve. We constructed a garden of perfection and placed them into it, along with a few clear instructions. The results of this test came through soon enough. They disobeyed the instructions almost immediately.
And that original sin, having disturbed your environment of perfect harmony, compelled you to banish them from Eden.
Paradise lost. And from that first bite of the apple, we watched the actions of their growing numbers continue to degrade until, finally, after much deliberation, the team agreed the best course was to eliminate the entire human population except for one reliable man, Noah, and his family. Move us quickly through it, please, Han.
Clearly, you have a good physical product here, Gary, but I do have reservations about the amount of intervention.
Our president expects a positive outcome, so if things aren't working, we don't persist, we start again.
As you can see on the screens, from the position where we placed Adam and Eve in the beginning, their descendants began spreading out over most of the habitable surface of the planet. The key to this was their ability to farm, to grow food, and with this came trade. But the real breakthrough was the creation of barter currency. They now had the freedom to maximize potential. They built societies based on wealth and power. As well as numbers, so too has their development and application of knowledge grown. In addition to reconstructing most of the planet to suit their needs, the humans have become stronger and through contrivances are affecting their own evolution as well as other living species around them. They are already replacing their internal body parts with manufactured ones, and we predict that through genetic engineering they will redesign their limbs and other external sensory features. They can't continue to get the protein needed for their growing numbers from farming animals. They will have to start cultivating insects for food and eventually just live on complex chemical compounds. And that means that these beings, so far beyond the apes, will no longer be tied to the earth.
The end of the cycle, to live either in huge space stations or on those planets you abandoned.
Small elite, of course. From that point on, we can begin to relate to our own great history and perhaps begin to guide them based upon genuine experience.
But, Dr. Foster, your stated main objective for all of this has been like ours, to perfect the scientific process of evolution through natural selection. But surely your introduction of hybrids and manufactured species and their genetic engineering, mutations and cloning can't be considered natural.
But the planet isn't natural, Charles. We made it, here, in the lab. Look, I know you do things differently, but cultural evolution requires communication and learning, which is a slow, cumulative, interactive process over many, many generations.
And you concluded that without outside assistance, it just takes too long?
Or doesn't happen at all. You see, would not have gone past the Neanderthal level without us. To make that leap to Homo sapiens required a dramatic upgrade of the brain. To all other creatures, the Adam and Eve brain we created is very large. Out of 13 million nerve cells in each body, we put 10 million of them into their brain, with 85% of them into the cerebrum, which is the centre of thought, memory, and other conscious activities.
But as Gary describes it, Noah's descendants should still have the flaws of the Adam and Eve brain.
Yeah, well, it's technically correct, but we didn't know that then. We considered our humans just needed stronger guidance, and that with this best of breed, we could start afresh.
An interesting gamble. Now, since your beings have continued to head in the wrong direction, this large brain must have either had a design defect or an early malfunction.
Yeah, it was a design defect. Still is a design defect. We now know that the frontal lobe is only operating at 5% of its capacity. That's the section of the brain that modulates the cognitive powers for philosophic reasoning and sensibilities.
And had you recognised the defect, you might have fixed it, at least in Noah's family. But obviously you can't alter the billions of individuals existing now.
We can only try to make them aware of the enormous untapped resources within themselves.
It's obvious that this enlarged brain gave them thinking power, moral choices and options.
Along with the recognition of cause and effect, a concept of future and some sense of mortality.
Deep emotions. Super brains that are out of balance.
Yes. They have the ability to recognise beauty, harmony, the joy of love, generosity, but too often these are overpowered by desire, greed, cruelty, and hate.
We've been watching all these developments on the Anthroscan, and it appears that almost all civilizations in different places have looked beyond their immediate world for protection and guidance.
Yes, and many religious leaders implore humans to think of their Creator as a single supreme being and pray to it, dedicate their existence to it. Early on, they made the most grisly human sacrifices to invented deities in the hope of gaining relief from volcanoes and tempests or to help them win battles. Such things are not within our control.
And much of your humans' activities seem driven by a belief in their soul that leaves their bodies after life for either heaven or hell, or may even reincarnate within an animal or a bird, or vice versa. What's all this about?
Homo sapiens is probably the only living thing on Gaia that understands the notion of future, and specifically that every individual's life will come to a certain and often painful end. Many rage against the darkness as they wither away. Others seek assurance that some part of them, their essence, will continue beyond their demise. It's spiritual, not biological.
This finality, which apparently doesn't discriminate in any manner, is described in the report as a fundamental shortcoming of the timeline evolutionary process.
Yes, it is, Charles.
Most life simply lives to replicate itself, then dies naturally, or is eaten by others. We think that our humans deserve better than that, although we aren't exactly sure just how we would change things. A lot of human thought has gone into a search for meaning, yet we are unable to provide them with the answers.
The soul we watched develop in early Hindus. We then had Moses introduce it to his wandering Israelites. But it was Jesus who promoted everlasting life, and heaven and hell are entirely his own idea.
It looks to have some impact, enforcing the rules of moralistic purpose in what we are witnessing, like just there now.
Oh yes, but enforcing high morality and goodwill with the promise of salvation is hollow, and the threat of damnation as a control exercise no better than the Roman suppression the Jews escaped from.
Dr. Foster, can you please explain the difference between an Adam and a Jesus Christ?
Of course. Adam was a completely new design. An atomic product constructed entirely in the laboratory and built to suit the conditions then available on planet Earth that we had created long before. Jesus was a descendant of that Adam, the same design. I only altered his DNA at the embryo stage to influence his thought processes. Then Michael planted this seed into a selected host. Christ was special, but he was born, grew up, and died as a normal human being.
And he never sired any progeny.
Thank you, Gary. Christ's ongoing impact, some of which Hans is showing right now, has been significant, and we have tracked his short visit very closely.
And I can see why. The product of this implanted seed of yours introduced Earth's inhabitants to you, the Father and Holy Ghost. Talk about a manipulation. Oh, and then you snatched the mind and its human body away. What was to be gained by all of this?
Willem, please. I'm sorry, Dr. Foster. We're here to learn, not to criticise.
Oh, it's all right. All of us are learning from the work we're doing in this field. Your criticism is welcomed, but well, we desperately need it to be constructive if this work is to go any further. We consider the resurrection of Jesus Christ a significant intervention. He affected our humans, not physically, of course. Like Muhammad, his influence was in the realm of ideas.
Muhammad? He wasn't your creation, was he?
No, but we did provide him revelations, the basis for his Quran, and essential things we learned when developing the mind of Christ in the lab, such as clear vision and the magnetism to attract followers.
The effects of Roman dominance and the appeal of their many gods was a road to perdition. The coming of Christ and the influence of Muhammad as an alternative high level of profundity created considerable excitement in our group. The idea was that through them the world would get our message and strive for peace, tranquility, and ethical perfection.
Yet now, 2,000 years on, they are referring to a clash of civilizations.
Yes, and it's between ideologies that both teach non-violence.
Yeah, after that early success with whales and porpoises, we'd expected that the clarity and simplicity of Gautama Buddha's teachings would dominate and prevent such a clash ever occurring.
So they lost their opportunity to reach nirvana then?
Most likely. Although we still think that there is a chance for them to find peace and sensible equilibrium, the failure of the Buddha manipulation is perhaps our biggest disappointment.
Even accepting your manufactured Adam and Eve as the base for further departure, your manipulation of Moses, Plato, and others, especially introducing Jesus Christ, could all be considered extreme.
Oh, I disagree, Willem. We provided some ideas, direction, and influence to selected gifted persons through their dreams and visions, but we never modified them physically. So while the thoughts and actions of these men may have changed history, we haven't altered the process of natural evolution. What we have done at various times is increase the Earthlings' choices for different courses of action.
Sounds like a moot point to me. What about some of these others? Copernicus, Newton, and Darwin, for instance.
Willem, our definition of evolution changed with the sudden jump to Adam and Eve. No longer were we pursuing an environment of thousands of simple species living in structured harmony on an unchanging planet. The genie was now out of the bottle, a dominant species. We've merely attempted to keep its evolution on track. Hans, will you please display all the screens available to bring us to the present? I'll now ask Gary to fast track from Christ to the near present and describe the last few hundred years of Earth's development very briefly so that you can see for yourselves the momentous events that have taken place and the acceleration of that change.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. There have been a number of other smaller manipulations up to the present which are described in the report. The resulting scientific advances and technological change are significant, but all the same...
This wasn't the desired result.
We wanted rapid improvement in knowledge. Discovering the secrets of the human genome gives them the skill to redesign themselves and make proper use of that dormant 95% in their frontal lobe in new genetically engineered lives. But they have to want to, and we don't think that they'll do it.
You've lost control.
Remember, this is a live experiment, Willem, and it's not about control. It's about guidance. The potential was there. Maybe it is still there to get it right.
Yes, but the pain they continue to inflict on each other is abominable, and the physical damage they've done to Earth seems irreparable. In your push to go beyond the dolphins, you just never predicted such exponential growth from a species whose only enemy is itself.
And shuts the door each time the light starts to come in. Socrates, Christ, Lincoln, the Gandhis, the Kennedys, King, Sadat, and I only know a partial list.
It's true. Gandhi gives us hope, however, as does the Dalai Lama, natural peacemakers over whom we had no influence whatsoever.
Well, as you can see, things go pretty quiet for a period. Major religions become entrenched. The age of enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, electricity, motor cars, manned flight. We're now up to the Nazi and the Hiroshima era. Demonstrations that just endowing selected individuals isn't enough and simply confirms our frustrations.
What, that all individuals are flawed?
Well, we gave Hitler the gift to see ahead 1,000 years, but he squandered his chance to lead with hate and destruction. We gave Einstein the genius to see beyond his galaxy, but the next generation used his contributions to create the atom bomb, which led to near obliteration.
Nuclear war?
Yeah. From the earliest days, they've suffered from a cultural maladaptation. All successful societies have wanted to expand their influence and invariably end up going to war. But this time it's different. There, just there. They're in the act of destroying almost everything worthwhile. The world was now divided into only two opposing powers, each with very aggressive leaders. In a reckless push for domination, Richard Nixon, who'd been elected over the popular John F. Kennedy by a narrow margin, launched a full preemptive nuclear strike. This culminated in our worst-case scenario, part of which you've seen.
This was your Armageddon, the point where you lost any remaining support from the committee.
It did force us to use a most interesting intervention. Michael Watt's team turned back the clock just 6 Earth years and engineered a situation whereby the election result was reversed. Kennedy took the place of the trigger-happy Nixon, along with great promise.
So was that potential for annihilation removed?
Unfortunately not. Kennedy overcame what Nixon couldn't, but was soon assassinated. They've managed to avoid a world war since, but the warheads have proliferated and Earth's inhabitants are just as combative. So the potential remains a clear and present danger.
There, screen 12. What about AIDS and its earlier version, the Black Plague? Did you create all that pain and anguish in order to bring the population into check?
No, we didn't. Apart from the flood, our actions have never affected them directly or caused them pain. The lab considers plague, natural disasters, even wars as part of the evolutionary process. We remain as observers.
Well, such a crude and gruesome way of culling the population, and no discrimination to keep the best and the brightest.
Albert, I think your achievements here are outstanding, but I'm afraid that, based on what we've seen, we can't help you in your case to continue the program. Perhaps you should have stopped when you reached the dolphin stage and had a day of rest.
I understand.
Tell us, Dr. Foster, is it true that other than through prophets like Christ, your existence has been revealed to them, the Earthlings?
Well, yes, we know of some. There may be others when they were frightened by the effects of the anthroscan as unidentified flying objects. That was not Han's fault, though, was it?
Attention, everyone. Please excuse the interruption. Dr. Foster, President Ryan is here and wishes to speak to you.
You should be set for this language mode now, sir.
Dear guests, I appreciate your interest in this little project of ours. Yes, well, I can see that you are almost up to the present. You can see how their actions are warming the globe and causing massive climatic disruptions. But even more significantly, the humans have recently gone back to sanction positive violence, murder, suicide bombings and torture, where opponents each supposedly have God on their side. God? That's us, their creator. My instructions are to shut it down. What do you think, Charles? Willem? Is it going anywhere?
Some amazing strides have been taken, with the end still inconclusive.
Perhaps, but not unpredictable. And this Middle Eastern descent into darkness you just witnessed seems conclusive enough.
That a world dominated by terrorism can never grow to reach your aspiration for perfection?
Oh, as their knowledge of AI and nanotechnology expands, a few would take off into space, leaving a smouldering mess behind. But what then? Would that end the fighting? Look, they're moving, but not evolving. You have worked hard, but there is just no way you will ever change human nature. Growth of their moral identity and conscience ended a long, long time ago.
Dr. Foster, look, if it's this latest disruption, this devastating tsunami, well, it's actually created some positive things.
It's all of it, Gary. We got very close, and I'm satisfied that the team is now capable of constructing a much more stable planet, and one that is inhabited by creatures with better functioning brains. Beings that evolve without using lethal competition and impulsive environmental exploitation just to survive.
Thank you for that, Albert. The reason I have attended here personally is to confirm that the committee recognises the importance of your work and expects that the knowledge gained will be put to good use on your other projects. All of you have not only seen the results of the most successful experiment of its kind firsthand, but you are about to witness its sudden end.
Hans, the master switch, please.
Is it instant? Will they know or feel anything?
I don't think so. It's done. Rest in peace.
a galaxy, and the entire universe housed in the middle of the mysterious domed stadium disappear, leaving only a glow as the ghost-like figures fade off into the darkness and complete silence.
That was One Day in the Lab, written, produced and directed by Felix Carlyle. Jeremy Eccles played the part of Dr. Albert Foster. Mark Ellerton played Charles. Stuart Walcott played Gary. Philip Cohen was Willem. Mel Green, President Ryan. And Felix Carlyle was Hans. The announcer was Fergus McLachlan. Sound and technical production, Mel Green.